Hi, I'm Becky.
And I'm Lindsay, and we're here to talk about something a little controversial today, but something we're extremely passionate about, and that is why we believe the master-apprentice approach to teaching is outdated and shouldn't be part of the system anymore. She's laughing, she's going to do a lot of talking today because she's like, oh, why? I'm very excited about this one. So I can't wait, and we'll be chipping in and bouncing ideas. So you may already disagree with it, and we'd love to know in the comments, let us know. But yeah, we feel truly passionate about this from our own experiences, from seeing things that we see day in, day out, seeing the negative impact it has on students, and yeah.
There's so much, but I think we need to explain to those who don't know what the master apprenticeship model is, what it is.
Okay.
I'm going to see what you think of it first. I
do.
Pass it
over. So the master apprentice model I've seen many times, which is where I've got all this knowledge, my brain's full of all of this, and because I'm working with you and teaching it to you, I've got to give you all that knowledge, I've got to share all that knowledge with you, and you're going to learn what I'm going to tell you. Yes, master. Yes, master. Okay, what was that again? What was that again? What was that again? So it's very much about a person having the knowledge, imparting that knowledge onto somebody, and then that means that other person, well, then they're going to be a great musician or a great dancer or a great actor or a great writer because, well, I've passed on all my knowledge to them of the way to do it properly. Makes me a bit angry inside, this one.
Yeah, and it is that, and it's also a little bit of, I was taught this way, so I'm teaching you that way.
Yep.
There's nothing at any point in this whole approach that deals with what is going on with the person in front of you. There's no person-centered approach on this at all. It's all about you, your knowledge, and you showing off how great you are. In a nutshell.
Which creates a plethora of problems.
Oh, so many.
So for the students sitting in front of you, they're always feeling like they're not good enough and on catch up, because if they've got another idea or thinking about doing it another way or don't understand something, then immediately, especially when you're working with teenagers, their little teenage brain is going, failure, 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 I can't do it, I can't keep up, switch off, don't engage.
The likelihood of anyone who's teaching in that style as well is, because they know everything, they're not going to continue their own learning, at which point the information they're going to give is outdated. It could be that they end up causing some harm or some damage because things are constantly evolving and constantly being revisited and relearnt, because things change and our understanding over things happen.
And it's also looking at it from one viewpoint, that knowledge is from their learnt viewpoint, not looking at how that knowledge could have been absorbed through different experiences. So then we get into the world of bias and about perceptions and everything else. So then it's then pushing that person's bias and perceptions onto somebody else of the knowledge of what's good knowledge and what should work and what shouldn't. So it breaks down the creativity, it breaks down the questions, it breaks down the dialogue, it breaks down the openness to evolve and explore.
The huge concern over this style of teaching is you lose the person in front of you, your student, they lose their whole authenticity. They lose their way of interpreting a piece for themselves, of doing something for themselves, which means actually from a creative arts perspective and from the teaching intuition, if they want to go on and actually have a career in this industry, they're never going to achieve it because they haven't got that ability to think for themselves, to try things out for themselves, to put their own spin on it, even if it doesn't work, but so they can try it and see what that feels like and see if it's going to work, because they have not learnt those skills. It misses out on so many different things that a student needs in order to progress fully and in a holistic way, not just in a I say, you do.
And it also encourages people to just go looking for the answer rather than how do you get to the answer, because you can't always get to the answer. In everyday life, in practical tasks, you sometimes hit roadblocks and you hit stumbles, and the master apprentice approach doesn't teach the skills to overcome those stumbles and to persevere through and keep going. It's just find the answer. So the pressure's there, then panic sets in, and then they can't do it as well. So it stops allowing people to bring their experiences to the table as well, to evolve into something
It
new.
stunts people's learning and people's growth at the end of the day. if you're looking at something outside of the Master Apprentice model, you're not telling them the info. You're helping them get to that information, you're leading them. Sometimes you do need to give them that information. But one of the things as being a teacher is you do have all this knowledge, you have all this information, but you don't need to pass it all on. For some students, you need to pass on more than others. But you need to ask them how they're, like for me with singing and tuition, I get them to do something or ask them to try something out, and then I then always ask, how does that feel? Because then they start being able to express how it is. And initially, 9 times out of 10, when I start asking those questions with a student for the first time, they go, I haven't got a clue. But they're starting to inwardly process it and go, oh, I'm feeling it here, or I'm feeling it here, or, oh, actually, this is making me have an emotional connection for this way. But they won't be able to do that at the beginning without those questions being asked.
And we take this into like everyday life. So I'm doing some work at the moment with some children for their social emotional development and behaviour issues. And the expectation is you need to behave in this way. Okay? So they know that, they know right and wrong, but they don't know how to behave in that way. They haven't learned how to control their emotions. They haven't learned how to process the information that's coming at them. They've also missed so much social interaction to do with COVID, they don't have the social skills. But the expectation is, well, no, you need to behave like this, you need to do that. And inside, they know they need to do that, but they don't know how they need to go about doing that or how to fix it. So a lot of the stuff we're doing it's down to questioning, and it's down to questioning techniques. So Bloom's taxonomy is like, it's funny because in the education world, people love it or hate it. I love it, I adore it. So with this pyramid, you've got this huge pyramid on the most important information, the teeniest bit of information, the teeniest bit that carries the least importance is actually to do with knowledge, and it's to do with the teacher's knowledge of the subject. The power is in the questioning, the power is in the questioning of other students to each other, the question of themselves, the dialogue back with the teacher, open-ended conversations, open-ended questions, so it's not closed off with a right or wrong answer. It's directing them to find the way and interweave all that knowledge to come to a solution. So in the rawest form of that, I had a child last week that literally went, so this time last week, I'd have chose to hit this person with something that went on at lunchtime. And I went, okay, so what happened this time? Well, I thought about it and I stopped and I made the decision that this wouldn't be a good idea. I still felt angry though, and I still felt annoyed, and I did this and I said these words, but I didn't hit him. I was like, great, because he'd processed that information about how to respond in that setting. He still didn't get it all right, which is fine. It's a learning process. Step. But it's a huge step, and for him to go, I know I would have done this before, because he's been able to understand how to make those behaviour choices.
And actually, within the coaching world and with all the coaching training that you do, it's exactly the same principle. It's not about at any point do you answer the question. You're always asking the questions to get them to think about it themselves. And the one question you should always try and avoid is the question why.
Oh yeah, massive.
Why is a horrible question and a horrible word to use, because as soon as someone goes, well, why? You're like on the defensive. Why did you do that? What was the reason behind it? What was the reason behind that choice? And then you've got, rather than being on the defensive,
what did you think the outcome was going to be by doing it that way? So it's giving them more information to ask a question. Whereas if you go why, well, it also feels like you need a right answer. Whereas there isn't a right answer. And if you go into like the business development and everything like that as well, this master apprentice approach doesn't work, because just because it's worked for one business, just because that business person has been really successful in setting up their business, if they then sit with you and say, well, I did this, and this, so you need to do this, and this, it's not going to work, because there's so many variable factors to do with who your audience is, who your markets are, the area that you live in, the resources that you've got, the product that you're selling,
your own personal values,
your own
your own language, everything will be different. Not hugely, but there will be differences, and it needs to then be personalised to you.
Yeah. So, Master Apprentice doesn't exist at PHP. It's just left at the door. And we've had a few parents recently, because it's the start of a term, bringing their new children to us, who have gone, this is so refreshing, it's so nice. It's so nice to see the children be creative and allow the space to be creative. They're still learning the techniques and the skill sets, like we spoke about in a previous one. Is it technique or connection that's important? But you can't have one without the other. They're all important, but you need to allow the space to play, to be creative, to get stuck and figure it out. It's so important to get stuck and figure it out. And the master apprentice approach doesn't allow you to do that, because you've just got to get the right answer.
And the other thing with it, because you then start getting them involved in it, because you're not saying you do this, they're getting involved in their own tuition. They then start taking ownership, whether or not they realise that's what they're doing. They're taking ownership of their own learning, which means they come up with these things, and they'll come up with different things. I'm working with tongue twisters with 4-5-year-olds. And they're starting to, this week, they're creating their own tongue twisters. It's going to be absolutely hilarious going to be watching these and hearing what's coming out. But they're going to take responsibility and ownership for their own learning. That's nothing to do with me. I'm giving them the tools and I'm stepping back.
Yeah, and some of our Arts for Learning students we work with, who haven't been in schools, who are now in schools, when we started the journey with them, we were writing the emails, we were getting the information, and now they're like, no, I'll get that and bring it to you. And so it's developing that independence. It's not looking for the reliance on their teacher to give them the answer either. So I know a lot of people within the working environments talk about the resilience of their workforce, or the inability of, I hate the phrase, the youth of today, to be creative or come up with ideas or problem solve. Equally, there's generations who haven't been taught how to. It's not their fault.
And there's the current generation that's starting to go into the workforce now. They have been spoon-fed everything because of COVID. That's not their problem. Well, it is their problem, but it's not their fault.
It's not their fault, so you can't be frustrated at them. You can't presume that they're going to know. And whatever environment you're working with people, you've got to build in this development of these skills, these transferable skills that they need. And when somebody doesn't understand something or looks a bit petrified, you've got to go, okay, hang on a minute, they don't know how to approach this.
Just because you know how to do it does not mean the person in front of you does, and you cannot make that assumption. I always like that phrase, assume makes an ass out of you and me. Love it. Yeah, it's one of those things. I've got a few of them.
We need a banner of that one. It's a good one.
And it does, and it ultimately, from my perspective and my interpretation of that, it makes an ass out of you as the teacher or the employer more than it does than the person that you're working with or training. Because it's your responsibility as the person teaching and training that person to ensure that they do know those skills and you do cover everything, even if it is a case they turn around to you and go, really sorry, but I do know how to do that. And that's like, absolutely happy for that to happen.
And it all comes down to your equality, diversity and inclusion, because if you're not considering these things, then you're not going to create an inclusive environment, whether it's an inclusive studio, workforce, practice, whatever it is. It's not going to have a diverse staff of people, or because people won't feel like they can fit in. So it's so integral to building that team, whether it's your team within your sessions or your team for your actual business. You've got to consider it, and it is, you have to step out of the box and you have to consider what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes. One of the most powerful things that somebody once said to me when I was doing a lot of my training, they were talking about classroom management, they were talking about how to engage certain children, how to differentiate, how to scaffold it, how to break it down, how to do Bloom's taxonomy and put it into practice. And then I had this most inspirational coach, and she said to me, right, now you've all got that, now you get up and go sit there. And she put us in different places in the classroom. And like when we sat in the different spaces, there was something in front of us that gave us a little card about the type of student that sits there. And so then we went through the whole process again, imagining what it'd be like to sit in their shoes. And I suddenly went, instead of being, I wasn't a teacher that really stood at the front, didn't believe in that anyway, but instead of some of those teachers that would just stand at the front, suddenly sat there and went, and I literally heard somebody say, gosh, the room looks so different from back here. Yeah. Something as simple as changing where you stand in the room changes your perspective. Then you can see it from the other person's point of view. If If you're doing Master Apprentice, you don't do that. You stand at the front, you give it all on, out. You don't see what's being given out. You don't see what they're taking on board. So yeah, take a moment to just think of it from somebody else's experiences, perspective, processing ability, age, even the level of where you stand, and talk to people. If you've got little children looking up at you, and then you ask them a question, their nerves and it all shows up. So when you're thinking about when you're asking some of those more direct questions that you need to sometimes, think about your body language, your stance, your position, where you are at the desk, where you are in the space, where you are in the studio, because they all have such an important impact on whether you can actually engage and have that open dialogue.
And mainly, do not give information out without asking questions afterwards. If you're going to give and impart any information, impart any knowledge, take the time to ask them what they think it means. Because how you think you are explaining it will be perceived and heard differently to how you expect it to go out as. It's the joys of human nature, it's the joys of how our brains are wired. And you can be in a room of 20 people and there will be no two same responses.
Yep.
Everyone will have taken on something different. So if you're doing any work, any teaching within a group session, you need to make sure that you get them working together. You step away from that. You can impart some knowledge, you get them to work together, because that peer-to-peer side is so, so important.
So go and research a bit of Bloom's, put yourself in their shoes, and take the time to think about how what you're saying is being perceived by others. I think would be
how it's being heard,
how it's been heard,
how it's being translated, and let them talk it back. And don't get upset if they come back at something and saying something very different to what you thought you had said. Because that means you have either not explained it correctly. It's not their fault for not understanding what you mean. That's the main. That is, for me, it's the biggest
main takeaway.
That's my biggest bugbear
yeah.
on this one. You have to make sure that they have understood exactly what you mean if there's something specific. If they haven't understood it, it is not their fault.
There's always a different way to do it.
Always. And
always
if you don't know how, then please reach out, please ask for help, because we're really good at doing that.
Yeah.
We're blowing smoke up our own backsides, but we are good at doing that. That is what we do. So yeah, always ask questions. Don't just deliver and walk away.
Yeah. So yeah, Master Apprentice, no place for it here at BHVA.
None at all.
Equally everybody learns differently, but we'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on this one, because I know it's a bit of a controversial subject out there. But yeah, so till next time, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.